Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. This is your host, Dan Turchin, advisor at Insight Finder, the system of intelligence for IT operations, and CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. Thanks as always for turning this passion project into one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you like what we do, and I certainly hope you do, please give us a like, a comment, share this episode in your favorite podcast app. We really value your feedback. It's always appreciated. We've been discussing the ethics of AI recently. Dr. Mark discussed how to mitigate the impact of biased training data. And then a few weeks back, we had a fascinating conversation with Tiernan Ray from ZDNet, among others, about that problem, but kind of in a more social context. The recurring theme is that humans are responsible for decisions made by machines. As much as that may sound controversial, it shouldn't be. AI can't be another way for big tech to weaponize your data against you. As a community of technologists, it's up to us to self-regulate to ensure that algorithms are trained, deployed, and monitored responsibly. Today, we've got a real treat. We get to meet one of the highest profile advocates for the practice of responsible AI. Krishna Gade founded Fiddler in 2018 to make AI explainable. He and the team recently raised a $32 million Series B, led by some of the most respected investors, including Lightspeed, Bloomberg Beta, and the Alexa Fund. Prior to Fiddler, Krishna held senior roles at Facebook and also at Pinterest. I strongly encourage you to learn what it takes to productize that kind of ambiguous term we call responsible AI by reading up on the latest. Go to fiddler.ai. It is the most mature platform I've seen that tightly packages a lot of what we've all read in white papers and speeches and research into something that really is a shovel-ready toolkit for AI practitioners. With that said, Krishna, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Why don't you get started by sharing a little bit about your background and how you got into this space?
Yeah, thank you for the kind words, Dan. It's a pleasure to be on this podcast. And so where do I start? I'm an engineer by background. I came to the States in 2001 to pursue graduate school. And after that, I held, software engineering and engineering leadership roles at Microsoft, Twitter, Pinterest, and Facebook. So I was actually part of this whole, big data and machine learning and AI revolution, especially in the consumer internet companies, to create analytics and machine learning based products for end users, whether that's, Bing search or recommendations or ads type of products that these companies have produced at scale. During that process, when I was at Facebook, I was exposed to this concept of model explainability. So when I was leading this ranking platform team in 2016, Facebook was running a lot of complex machine learning models to predict, what kind of recommendations that we should show or what kind of ads. And one of the main problems was these models were huge black boxes. We didn't really know how they're making their predictions. And if an exec were to ask us, hey, why am I seeing this ad? The engineer would not be able to answer it very well, or at least quickly enough. So given the importance of transparency and rebuilding customer trust at Facebook, some of which had to do with the 2016 elections and some of the customers' impressions on the company, this became a high profile project within the company. And, we built lots of tools to monitor, debug, explain machine learning models at scale, and to provide, insights for developers to build better models, but also, share how these models are working across the organization, create a sense of transparency. So that's what, led me to start Fiddler, because at the time I saw that a company like Facebook could do it, but what about everyone else, right? And why should everyone redo it? And so I, started working on Fiddler, left Facebook, and basically we wanted to build a general purpose platform that helps enterprise companies across the board to build trustworthy AI products. And today we have a product in the market. We call it a model performance management system. It essentially helps data science and machine learning teams to continuously monitor their AI and machine learning applications in production at scale, help them diagnose, performance issues, and help them explain how these models are working to various stakeholders.
AI explainability can often seem like kind of esoteric, kind of academic topic. One of the things I mentioned kind of in the intro is you found a way to productize it. And what I'd like to learn or help the audience understand is, how do you take something that's a little bit of an amorphous concept and turn it into like I said, kind of a framework or a toolkit for AI practitioners?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. One of the main challenges with machine learning and AI is the proliferation of machine learning libraries. There's no universal format. There's no one single way to build an ML model. You could be building a neural network or a decision tree. You could be using a TensorFlow library or a PyTorch library, and there's no standardization anywhere, right? So, and the algorithms keep coming, new model architectures keep getting invented. So it was we needed to make a choice of how do we productize it at scale, so that we can at least cover 80+% of the use cases, right? So what we have indexed upon was a certain class of explainability algorithms called attribution-based algorithms that treat the model more or less as a black box and try to probe the models with changing the inputs. For example, let's say if I have an underwriting model that is making predictions of how risky a particular loan application is. And it might be looking at a few variables like the loan amount requested, the FICO score of the person, or maybe the income of the person, right? Now, these attribution-based algorithms, what they do is they generate lots and lots of counterfactual inputs, which means it makes small perturbations to the inputs for the same loan application, and try how the model is actually making those predictions. And based on that, they make some statistical estimations around which input is actually having a huge impact on the model's output, and then attribute that as an explanation. So they may say, hey, this person is asking for a $10,000 loan amount. That is actually increasing his risk profile by 20%. Or this person's income is actually, only $100,000. That's increasing her risk by 25% or something like that, based on that, and it's personalized to that particular loan application or whatever data point that you're trying to explain. And so by actually indexing on that, we were then able to build a platform that can then digest all these different model architectures, model types, and run these explainability algorithms on those model types at scale, so that we can then visualize them in a consistent way. But we still needed to make sure that the visualizations are suited to the data types. So for example, if you have more structured data, like in the example that I gave, we will show a certain kind of visualization that is more of a tabular way of manipulating inputs. If it's like a unstructured data with like a piece of text, we allow for changing words and replacing words and things like that. So we show a certain type of visualization to explain the model's outputs. So that was a successful experience, and we see now customers benefiting from it and being able to probe these models and understand how these models work.
So in AI, we typically measure the performance of a model using a ROC curve. We compare precision and recall. We don't often think about explainability as kind of a third axis. Convince us, why does explainability matter as much as precision and recall?
Absolutely. So when you rewind a few years ago, right, when people were building, say, simple linear models or logistic regression models, you could actually understand how the model works by looking at the weights of the model. You could say that, okay, this particular parameter has the highest weight, so it'll have the, you can basically try to reason about how these models would work, right? However, as the models became more and more complex, with like multi-layers of neural networks and deep neural networks, boosted trees, ensembles of these models, it's very hard to know what's going on. While we have achieved tremendous accomplishments in terms of accuracy of models. We have seen ImageNet accomplishments. We've seen so many other AI use cases where AI is able to beat humans and is able to make predictions at scale. There is not knowing how it works can actually cause a lot of risks. So, for example, when it fails, and if it fails, for a certain demographic of people, or for a certain type, for a certain set of users that your organization might care, then it can, and if you don't know how it works, then it becomes like a big problem for the company's reputation, right? So, for example, a couple of years ago, Apple launched a credit card to make predictions. So to essentially set, they were using machine learning to set credit card limits, right? And it was a very seamless process. You could just apply for it and you could get it immediately. However, the problem was within the same household, some people experienced 10 times of differences in credit limits being set between a man and a woman, a husband and a wife. Typically, the wife got lower credit limit, right? And when some of these people went online and complained about it, Goldman Sachs customer support didn't have great answers. In fact, one of the users mentioned on Twitter that the answer from the customer support team was, "We don't know, it's just the algorithm." Now that basically became a big news story. There was a regulatory probe conducted into Goldman Sachs, and eventually sort of they had to make some corrections. Now, this is a case where you have AI or machine learning failing, and potentially the company may not know what's going on, or they may not be able to diagnose how this could have happened. And in this case, if you had explainability tools or model monitoring tools, you could catch them early on when you are actually training and testing these models. You may have had a high accuracy overall, but maybe there was a certain segment of population that were getting affected in a negative manner by the model, and that's not captured by these high-level metrics. And this is where explainability will give you a lens to look into the model and see how it's performing across the board, and then take a decision whether you want to deploy it, or and then also monitor it properly.
Great example. So you mentioned AI today is unregulated in how it's used. Like I said, the Apple example is a really good one. And yet increasingly it's quite prevalent in terms of where and how AI is used to make automated decisions. If you were the president or the emperor or the prime minister, and someone said, "Hey Krishna, what should we do to regulate responsible use of AI?" How do we do it, given that we're starting from zero?
Absolutely, it's a great question. See, I think governments are realizing the importance of regulating AI. Europe is definitely ahead of America in this case. Recently, they've launched a GDPR-like regulation for AI, where they used terms like trust is a must with AI. If you're building AI applications, you need to be able to explain them, and you need to be able to you need to have certain practices and processes in place, such as like monitoring and periodic testing of these models. And the reason why this is important is because machine learning and AI are touching our human lives at a scale that is unprecedented, right? 20 years ago, maybe most of these machine learning models in these internet companies were only used to supply ads. It's not a big deal if you're shown a wrong ad, right? But what if this model is predicting, I'm trying to refinance my house, and let's say I'm going to a fintech company that makes mortgage recommendations from me. What if I don't get approved? What if if I'm applying for a loan and my resume is getting screened by an AI and it gets rejected? And what if this is happening at scale and it's affecting certain type of people in a negative manner, right? Because how these AI systems are trained, what kind of data that they're being used is not fair, because the world is not fair and it's not equitable, right? So these are the concerns that people, from amongst users that are coming forward, and that's making governments think about it. One of the first things the US should do is to look into the Algorithmic Accountability Act. It's something that that the Congress has been working on for almost 2-3 years now to regulate AI and create accountability across these companies. And I think I would try to look into how do we actually get that over the line, right? So that's something that is very important for us to be able to do as soon as possible.
I would fully support anything that you or Fiddler are doing to advance that through Congress. I know that it's moving at glacial speed, but yeah, that Algorithmic Accountability Act would be certainly a good first step. Now, famously, I recall an incident where your former employer, Facebook, designed, I think it might have been GAN or something, a generative adversarial network, and it was 2 bots that ended up inventing a language of their own. Now, for deep neural nets or GANs or really complex AI-based environments, sometimes even the developers are unable to deconstruct what happened to produce the outputs. Is it reasonable to expect that any AI, like that example of Facebook, can be made to be explainable?
Yeah, so the more complex the system is, the more complex it will be to explain it, right? So it's essentially what it is, right? So, however, for a lot of these models, when they are when you're building these systems, they are essentially a set of ensemble models that are coming together to make a decision. So at the very least, you can actually deconstruct at individual model level to identify how the models are making this, predictions, and you can try to sort of do some global analysis where you can run it against different examples, where you can actually see how the model is predicting across different types of examples. Maybe if you want to check for bias within the model, how do you surface up certain types of data sets that you can test the model against and see how it's performing, right? So the short answer is, can you explain everything that's being created? No, but you can try definitely to try hard to actually do it. The problem today with the industry is not so much around lack of tools, right? There is pretty good open source libraries for explainability. There are tools like Fiddler that they're trying to build to take this enterprise. It's actually the will for the executives to push for this within their organization, to think about these things, to make sure that they have this process and practice in place to use these tools to develop and sort of make sure that their AI is responsible. So that is what we are trying to evangelize more. There are obviously forward-looking companies. Some of our customers that partnered with us they have this at the top of the mind, and they want to make sure that they're building responsible AI for their customers and as well as for their own organization. But it has to percolate across the industry.
So let's say one of your customers comes to you and says, I get the need for explainability. I'm going to obviously use Fiddler for that. But I've also heard that biased data can lead to biased models. What's your coaching for AI developers who genuinely want to mitigate the impact of bias, but aren't sure where to start?
Absolutely. So explainability is an enabler, right? So it helps you look into what's going on with the model. So for example, if you go back to that underwriting model example, let's say now I have created a model, I want to deploy it. But before you do it, can we run it against a few examples? Can we run it against different segments of population that your users may be under? Maybe you may have different types of people, from different ethnicities, different backgrounds, and how is the model doing across that? And see if the model is performing equitably across all of those classes, protected classes, or intersections of protected classes, right? Like say you may have a racial race as a protected class, marital status or age, or gender, all of those things. You want to see how the model is doing, right? And Fiddler helps you to get a model scorecard that gives you a holistic picture of how the model is doing across all of these protected classes and intersections of them, and helps you identify these segments where the model is underperforming. And not only that, you can then look into those segments to identify the reasons why the model may be underperforming using explainability. So these are interlinked. So how you assess fairness, and then once you identify a poor performance, and then identifying the reasons behind it is where explainability will help you.
So one of the adjacent threads here is that as AI gets better and hopefully it's more explainable and hopefully it's being used responsibly, more and more tasks are going to be automated using AI. When I look at the world that my daughters are inheriting, and I look at, they're on the cusp of, going into high school, and what are the skills that they should be learning and where are their passions, I'd like them to invest in skills that are not likely to be automated in the next 10, 20, 30 years. What are those skills that just will never be good candidates for automation?
Yeah, the skills that make us humans. I think they will never be replicated, or will be far down the timeline that, if ever the AI system will be able to replicate it, right? Things that make us humans, emotional intelligence, soft skills, things that, create, like creativity, human creativity of being able to map ideas from one to another and think about new things, right? So those are the things that I think it'll be hard for AI systems to replicate. What will be automated is things that we are more rote and repetitive work, right? Where you can crunch a lot of data at scale and be able to make high quality predictions. So for example, my dad was an underwriter in an insurance company for a number of years, right? So they would look at actuarial tables into sort of how do you, what kind of policy premium would you set for a life insurance applicant. Those things can be done with machine learning, because you can you essentially you have, if you can train the model with sufficiently large enough data set and make sure that it's performing well, then it can make those predictions. And you can also eliminate human bias that may have existed in the past. However, even in those cases, there will be some human element involved, because especially to provide customer support, the experience. So the humans, like in those cases, maybe if my dad were to work like 20 years down the line, maybe his experience would be not so much around figuring out like the math on how to use actuarial tables, but more around how to make like the customer experience better, how to build relationships and use the system as a sort of as a tool to help the customer, right? So I think that will be the shift that we would see in the future of work, with humans to use these tools and do the tasks that make us humans. And and I think that's where I think we should have our kids spend more time on, along with obviously the more technical subjects if they're interested. It's the soft skills that they need to develop.
You are solving such a big problem, and you and Fiddler are off to such a good start. You've had an amazing amount of success, even just in a short time. Talk to us about your entrepreneurial journey so far. What has surprised you most about the experience?
Yeah, so I think when we started, we didn't realize how lofty, what kind of a mission that we are on, right? So when we started in 2018 to make AI explainable, to build trust into AI, when you're in this thing where you're trying to build a product MVP, you're trying to figure out how to do this, you kind of don't see how much impact it can have on the world. And as things unfolded, as the events like Apple Card or many such events that have happened, we realized the importance of the impact that this company has. So we're actually extremely lucky to be in a space where we're building a company they're solving a very important technical problem within the machine learning industry. It's like very hard technical problem. How do you explain a complex machine learning model? It's very, very hard, right? It's something that can be made into viable business, something that we were able to prove. But also more importantly, there is like it has a social component to it, right? Whatever we are doing is ultimately we're trying to have, make the world a better place. And I think that I think is what excites all the employees at Fiddler, and also excites us. And because you don't get those opportunities every time, especially when you're trying to build enterprise software, it's so much disconnected from the rest of the society. Usually, you're trying to build a great database. You don't really know what kind of social impact you may have, right? But Fiddler, it's a different feeling. So that was a huge surprise that I didn't expect when I started. And then the second thing was, how much people were willing to help. So many people, especially given the category that we selected, and people like you who have come forward to actually, help us along the way, evangelize it, and take this movement forward.
So you're an engineer by training, but now all of a sudden you're the head of HR and you're the head of sales and marketing and fundraising and operations. Which of those skills have you felt like it was the weakest muscle that you've had to spend some time in the gym on?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think some things that I've done as an engineering manager in the past had come in handy. So for example, was managing teams for a few years before. So it helped me recruit. It helped me sell a little bit of vision, right? Recruiting is also a little bit like sales, but the thing that was very hard to master in initial days was just doing enterprise sales, right? Because there's a process towards it. There's actually a way to make sure that you have to have like a pretty rigorous sales process to be able to successfully take a customer through that. And then also the thing that we've learned over time is how much, especially when you're building a product in the enterprise space, how much the product development and the go to market are coupled. How they're so interwoven, and you have to think about them, both of them, all the time. And so that was another learning experience. So there are obviously lots of help online, but you never learn these things until and unless you do them, right? We had great advisors, our investors helped us a lot, but we made mistakes and sort of learned from those mistakes, and tried to sort of keep making some new mistakes, I would guess. But it's been a fun journey so far.
Krishna, I got to get you off the hot seat, but not without one last question. CEOs, everyone looks to you for the answers. And one of the things that makes it challenging is that we don't always have the right answers. In fact, sometimes there isn't a right answer, and yet you're still going to be asked to have one. Where would you say you're comfortable being vulnerable? And, is there any example of where you've been comfortable hiring someone, more qualified than you are because, it's a kind of a known gap in your skill set?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it started from day one itself, right? One of the things that I thought that was important for a product like Fiddler to be successful was to have someone who has a great sense of UX design, visualization. So my co-founder, who built a lot of consumer internet apps and a great designer himself, I picked him because he was great at doing these things, and so I have no idea about design or user sort of visualization, which is a very important part of what Fiddler is today. And same thing continues across the board. I think one of the things that I've realized watching, I've been fortunate to have worked in some really great companies. And I'm fortunate to have seen some great companies from the very early stages, like when I was like at Twitter, it was 100 people when I joined. So I watched some of the founders up and close. I was very inspired by some of these founders, especially like when I was an employee at Pinterest. One of the core values of the company was authenticity, which I actually remember. So I think we've tried to imbibe some of those cultural attributes when we started Fiddler. Yeah, do I have answers for every single question that my employees ask? No, but we don't have any problem admitting that we don't know about them, and we'll try hard to figure out the answers. And I think that is one thing that we have been very clear from day one.
Krishna, it's really been enjoyable. I've been looking forward to this, and certainly I learned a lot from you. And as a fan of Fiddler, one thing I'd like before we leave you today is share with the audience, where can they learn more?
Absolutely. See, I think when we are at this inflection point where every software that we have interacted with is going to get reformatted to be AI-based and model-based software. And especially if you're on the field, this, if you're a machine learning engineer, you're a data engineer watching, these systems moving from traditional rule-based or quantitative model-based systems moving towards machine learning and AI-based systems. And it's very important for us for this to be successful to be able to make sure that we are creating enough transparency into how these systems are working, both for ourselves as well as for our entire organization, right? And I think it not only helps us to use AI in a much more efficient manner, but also helps us build responsible products for our customers. And we are very excited to take this mission forward, to bridge this gap between the human and the AI system, so that human can trust the AI and then sort of benefit from it. And so if you're interested to either work with us or work for us, hit me up, Krishna at fiddler.ai.
Thank you, Krishna. And feels like we're just getting started. Fiddler has so much growth ahead of it. Maybe we'll have you back on another episode and have the next version of this conversation. What do you say?
Absolutely, Dan. It was a pleasure, and I loved the questions, and looking forward to the podcast.
Well, again, thanks to Krishna. Thanks to Fiddler. That's a wrap for this week. This is your host, Dan Turchin, signing off, but back next week with another fascinating guest.